Recording in progress.
Alrighty. Minute Message and Micah here. This is video number 3. 1, 2, 3. Perception of world view. All right. And hope y'all are getting something out of this. Again, y'all are God's audience. And this is a 101 basic class here. So just basic concepts right here. Perception of world view. All right. So world view. And just kind of piggybacking off of where we ended on class 2, we've clearly got different philosophies out there, right? You got the Satanist, the witch, the Muslim, the Christian, the atheist, the rainbow people. They all have different philosophies, right? Some of them might share similar ideologies, but different philosophies. All right, so when we're discussing worldview, right, your cave, remember Plato's cave from episode or video 1, class 1? It's your environment, right? So we have, and for all who don't know, Mr. Richard Dawkins here, Dawkins, a staunch atheist. This man hates God, right? He got his PhD in, it's going to sound funny, zoology, but it's not. His PhD isn't in animals of the zoo. It's in genetic DNA, right? Now, and I believe he got that PhD in the late 60s. So the man's been a PhD, for a really long time. And there has been advances in DNA technology since the 60s, right? I don't know if he's abreast of all of them. But he has taught, he's a professor, he's a PhD, right? When you get to that level, you're going to teach at a university. And that's where he's made his career. And we got Dr. Kent Hovind. And if anyone's familiar with this man, I'd like to meet him one day. He's over there in Lenox, Alabama right now. DrDino.com, Dinosaur Adventureland. And this man, he's got his PhD in a philosophy of education, right? That's what his PhD is in, philosophy of education. So you got 2 PhDs. Yeah, they're a little different, philosophy of education and then zoology with an emphasis on DNA and genetics. But when it comes to worldview, they're both looking at the same thing. The conclusions they come to are not the same. So who's correct, right? So in respect to how did the Grand Canyon form? Well, this guy, because he doesn't believe in God, he's going to have a much different philosophy and idea and conclusion than this man who does believe in God, how the Grand Canyon was formed, right? And so, like I said in video 1, you don't have to defend the truth. Set it free, it will defend itself, right? So science aims to answer how the Grand Canyon was formed, right? We can go throughout the science all day long. And with science, I didn't say this in video 1, not emphasis. I did say this. There's science and there's pseudoscience, and there's that science falsely so called. So pseudoscience, just to put it out there, if I have a claim so big that you can't disprove it, and I can't prove it, I got a claim so big, I cannot prove it, but you cannot disprove it. We call that pseudoscience, right? That is some pseudoscience right there. All right. And so philosophy aims to answer why we have different conclusions from looking at the same thing. And I wanted to put on here, but I I didn't have the room, or I guess I would have had the room. That picture, you got two dudes, and they're looking at a 6 from one view, one angle, and the other dude sees a 9, right? Whatever object it is, this guy sees a 6, this guy sees a 9. Well, who's right? Philosophy. Right? So with our worldview, just like them guys in the cave, our own personal experiences in life shape the world around us. Yes, it does. Everyone has their own experiences, and many share the same experience. And how we perceive and interpret them forms our belief system around that. So a simple example, simple example. I'm keeping it real simple here. Roller coasters, right? Roller coasters. Everybody's familiar with a roller coaster. Why do some people like them? Look at this woman's enjoying herself. And this young woman, she's enjoying herself too. Definitely giving that a like. While others dislike them, right? This woman clearly isn't having it. And this woman doesn't look. I'd say if she had to choose the like or dislike button, she's going to push the dislike button. Others refuse to get on them or get on them again, right? They've done it. They didn't like it. They're not doing it again. Why? Their own personal experiences have shaped their worldview, right? They experienced being on the roller coaster, thrashing about, flying along, coasting, coasting, coasting on the tracks. Some people don't like them, right? Is it a little rattly? Yeah. I, from personal experience, when I was a little boy, I had the, I guess you can say, privilege under interesting circumstances to go to Paramount's Great America practically every weekend during the summer and fall when I was a young man, a little boy, definitely a little boy, 9, 10 years old, 11, 10, 11 years old. Yeah, 10, 11 years old. It's good times, 1995, 1996. And I did my share of roller coasters. Like even when they came up with a new roller coaster, I like I don't care if I got to wait 3, 4 hours in line. I'm gonna do this new roller coaster. It was fun. I won't forget it. It's called the Vertigo or Invertigo at Paramount's Great America. I'm sure it's long since been torn. Who knows where it is? But anyway, everyone, they have their own experience, right? If you like it, if you like the roller coaster, you're going to have a generally positive outlook towards theme parks, if you will, and thrill seeking adventures like that. And if you don't like it, you're not going to like it, right? Or you just might be indifferent towards it, right? So you don't care. There's that moral compass right there. But that is shaped in their environment, that has shaped their worldview of that, right? And like I said, while others refuse to get on them, they haven't even ridden the roller coaster, but they don't like it. They've already made up their mind. They've seen it from afar. Maybe they heard it flying through. They've heard stories about it. They don't like it. And it's bad philosophy. It's bad philosophy to say they don't like it because they haven't tried it. And I can, if someone, you don't like it because you haven't tried it. Well, I can, with logic, I can counter that. Like, have you ever been kicked in the crotch? Have you, like, just bam, a kick in the crotch? Most people would say, no, I haven't. Well, how do you know you won't like it if you haven't tried it? Right? Like, I turned the claim on its head. Right? It's like, well, if you tried this, something that probably wouldn't be a good experience, and use the same argument, the same logic. How do you know you won't like it if you haven't tried it? I can tell you now, getting kicked in the crotch doesn't sound like a good time. So to say you don't like something because you haven't tried it, that's bad philosophy. Yes, it is. Okay. All right. So, and this was a vocabulary word we learned in high school. Milieu. It's a noun. It's your environment in which you grew up in, thus making it familiar, right? It's not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong. It's your environment. It's your milieu. It's what you're familiar with, right? So like if your dad was, oh, I don't know, a police officer, right? And I'm just making stuff up as I go right now. If your dad was a police officer, I'm sure he come home and tell stories of criminals and all the bad things that he saw happen. And so if you're a little boy or little girl, hearing your dad come home from work all stressed out from being a police officer all day, it's going to form your opinions of cops and criminals and law and order and justice, right? Definitely, versus someone who wasn't exposed to that. Or if your dad was, I don't know, a lawyer and you saw all the prestige and money that comes with it and rubbing elbows with, mayors and city council members and what have you, going to fancy restaurants because you're a lawyer. Like, call me skeptical, but I don't think lawyers go to the common places. I don't. Right. That's your milieu, right? It's your surroundings, especially of a social or cultural nature, influenced by culture, pop culture and traditional. So, like most of us, we grew up in America, right? So, American tradition and American pop culture is what we're familiar with. It's our environment. Now, if, you go to foreign foreign places outside of America with different traditions and customs and cultures, it's unfamiliar territory, right? So the way they the way they treat, I should say, the way women are treated in Iran. If we were to go over there and see how they treat women in Iran and how the people of China are treated, that's going to be very unfamiliar with us, right? We don't understand it because we have a different environment that we grew up in. All right. So philosophically speaking, your cave is your environment. It's all the experiences that shaped your worldview. As we have observed in our life, there are different people with different philosophies. Yes, there are different people with different philosophies. As regular people going about your day, you know this and expect to come across a few jack wagons and hamburger herrings. And what I mean by a jack wagon is the guy who cuts you off and tries to brake check you and then purposely drives slow on the freeway. They're a, you come up with your own conclusions on what kind of guy that is, but I'll call him a jack wagon. And there's a few hamburger Harrys who they they just ain't all that they remind me of Forrest Gump, a character like that, just not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But as Christians wanting to reach people with the gospel, this is fundamental to understand when dealing with those who know not Jesus, them who have a different worldview, right? You can't, high school students and people who are just, new to the gospel, sharing their faith, they come across someone with, an atheistic worldview and they don't know how to process. Like, well, what do you mean you don't believe in Jesus? It's like, no, they don't believe in Jesus. In fact, they probably believe in the devil. Right. So understanding this is important, right? Like, well, why do they believe in the devil? Maybe because they had a bad experience with God, right? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe their parents were, maybe they're Spanish speaking and they have that Santeria devil worship voodoo stuff, You like this stuff, it's good to know. When you challenge other people's worldview, just as it was several millennia ago in the time of Plato and his cave, so is it today, right? Different worldviews, different worldviews right here. Yes. All right, so we got Christians in the world, right? They've got their worldview on different ideologies. We have atheists, which are, I wouldn't say they're, perfectly opposed, but they're definitely not on the same page. I wouldn't say they're opposite of Christians. I wouldn't. Yes. Muslims, right? Their religion of peace and their culture, because Muslims predominantly are in a different region of the world. So they've got their own cultures and customs that surround Islam. We have the old rainbow people, which they're everywhere. I don't think there's one nation where they're not, right? And contrary to what the media will have you believe, they are a small minority. You might have a bunch of sympathizers with them and people who just don't care, right? But the actual rainbow people, they're a small minority, but their voice is much louder than the Christian, if you will, right? The witch. I'll also accept Wiccan, Warlock, or Necromancer because that's about what they do. And anyone who doesn't know what a warlock is, it's a male witch. And a necromancer comes from the root word, it's like a medical term, necrotic, right? If you have necrotic flesh, if something is necrotic, it's dying, it's decomposing. So a necromancer is someone who summons up the dead. And anyone who's read their Bible, especially First Samuel with Saul and the Witch of Endor, and I might make that'd be a good minute message talk about. The Witch of Endor summons up Samuel. Yes, you can. I don't know how, but it is possible. I believe it. I ain't messing with it, but you can summon up the dead. Yes. But like the Christian, the Christian is commanded not to summon up the dead. Whereas the witch and the necromancer, that's what they do. Totally different right there. You got Mattis representing the Jews, and he's got a song called Jerusalem, came out in 2006. Very good song. Very simple, very right to the point. It's a great song. I don't really care. That's the only song I know from the guy. But the Hasidic Jews, the Jews of Israel, nonetheless, completely different philosophy. They rejected Jesus as the Messiah, right? They're waiting for their Messiah. Their Messiah is coming. And the Hindus, right? They got completely different culture and traditions than any of these other people, right? And you can't even say the Hindus like the Muslim. No, totally different right there. Not the same. Not the same at all. And then you can't forget Mr. Brian Hugh Warner. Oh, Antichrist himself. Right there. And all these people, they all have different philosophy. They're all people. They're all people, right? And I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead here. Do they all have value? Are some of these people more valuable than others? That's a philosophical question, right? And your worldview is going to form that answer. I don't think men should be wearing makeup, but hey, obviously he doesn't have a problem with it. right? So completely different ideologies, completely different ideologies. All these people, all of them. And we're all under the sun. We all have to live together on this, land that we call Earth. Let all the dry land appear, and it was so. So we're all here. All these the Muslims, the anarchists, the Hindus, the Asians with their Taoism, yin yang, the Hasidic Jews. You can't forget the El Charos, right? Hey, I'll tell you what, I like me some good Mexican food. Can't argue that. Need to say that the Satanists, the devil worshippers right here, there's always that crowd with their heavy metal. The witches that kind of, shun society and live out in the wilderness, summoning up spirits. And somewhere over the rainbow are those people there, right? And then you got just a family, husband and wife trying to raise kids, right? And then you got the Christian. Yeah, all these different people, all these different people. There they are, just right there. And they all got to coexist, right? No, no, they're not going to coexist, right? Just as everyone has their own belief system, naturally, they will disagree with one another philosophically. I'll stop right there just for a second. So something that came across in 2018, a channel I was watching in 2018, 2019. So there were a bunch of Muslims from what happened? There was a big humanitarian refugee crisis. I think it was all kind of by design, but a bunch of Muslims went to the Nordic countries like Sweden and Norway, where they're predominantly, a homogenous race of people with the same culture and traditions. And then a bunch of Muslims got put in their village. And then some rainbow people. So between the Muslim and the rainbow people, what common group of people would they not agree with? The Christian group of people, right? The rainbow people don't like the Christians, and the Muslims definitely don't like the Christians. And so I'm watching this video, and they said, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's philosophical right there, but it's true. That is true. The Muslims, their enemies, or their enemy is the Christian, and their enemy is the rainbow people. But the rainbow people were attacking the Christians. So they were not attacking the rainbow people, right? They were just letting them be. But once the Christians kind of went away, and the two groups standing is the Muslims and the rainbow people. Well, now what? Well, the Muslims, start attacking the rainbow people. And so it's like the whole system falls apart. Just everyone has their own belief system. Naturally, they will disagree with one another philosophically. Yep. Intangible concepts such as justice, love, and morality will put different groups of people at odds with another, right? So, like justice. If you steal something, what's the punishment? Chop off the hand? Oh, it's a bit harsh, isn't it? Isn't it? Or is that right? So, given all these different belief systems, philosophically, who's right? Who makes the rules? Does, do the atheists make the rules? Do the Jews make the rules? Do the Jews run the world? right? The Jesuits. Who's right? Who makes the rules, right? Who's right? Who determines what is absolute truth? Philosophically, that question begs the question, are there absolutes, right? And that's how you got to think, right? Who determines what is absolute truth? Is there absolute truth, right? Are there absolutes? And I think with logic, we've kind of deducted that, yes, there are absolutes, right? And so to answer that question, we need to dive into the heated debate of objective versus subjective morality. And we'll get there. We will get there. But who's right? Who makes the rules? What is the universal moral standard in which we know what is absolutely right and wrong? Who makes the rules? All right, so let's see. Who does make the rules? Government. Government makes the rules. Of course, clearly government makes the rules, right? Government decides what's right and what's wrong. We got our US House of Representatives right here. But I believe this to be a false premise because governments do not agree with another. And so if you got two governments that disagree with each other, obviously there's no absolute right there, right? And so there's no standard in that regard, right? A government here doesn't agree with the and then you don't even gotta say like the Chinese Communist Party has, different different ideas and ideologies than the US government, right? You can just go to the US government and look at Texas and California. Those governments clearly do not agree with one another, right? The rules and regulations and freedoms and liberties in each of those two states are very opposed. Like they're almost night and day difference. It's almost like two different countries, if you will. Right. And if you really think about it, and this, learning how to think, not just what to think, but how to think. Government, you could look at it as it's just a collection, a board of directors of men, if you will, a collection of men, a board of directors of men that pen down their rules on how and what they want their subjects to observe in the form of a document called a Constitution, or in Canada, I think they call it a Charter of Human Rights, which they don't really have a lot of human rights up there. Not right now, right? Or a manifesto of some sort, right? You have a board of directors of men that say, "Hey, this is our land, and here's the rules," right? But it's like, who wrote those rules? I mean, fortunately in America, the men that penned down these rules for their subjects, they had liberty in mind, right? I think, and this is, me kind of going out there, but they were rebelling against authority. And so they said, hey, just to cover themselves, like, here's our rules. No tyrants, because they were really at the grips of a tyrant. So like, no tyrants. Tyrants are illegal here, right? So if, tyrants from Britain came down, you can't be here. Our paperwork says no tyrants, right? So, but nonetheless, it was a board of directors of men that penned down their rules, right? And all through human history, we've observed from government oppression, human rights violations, genocide. Can't forget about genocide. And genocide comes from the root word gene, genetics. Genocide. You're killing all the genes of a specific genocide, and corruption that leads to the unjust arrest and murder of political opposition. And that's to include people in high office and the little people, right? Speaking of which, y'all should watch that video that I just did. Uncle Sam will fall upon you. It was a good one, but it's true. And then as far as the rules, where do the rules get enforced in, say, America? The court system, right? Like, people don't understand, when the cop pulls you over, they think that's where the real fight is, right? Nah, that's not right. No. Like, but it feels like it because your street cred is on the line. Like, you as a man, in front of your wife and your kids in the back seat, are getting pulled over by this cop, and you become, how do I say it? You become, the cop's patsy, if you will, right? There's a word I want to use, rhymes with scratch and itch, but you essentially, like, the cop puts you down, and that's not where the real fight is. The real fight is in the courtroom, right? The real fight's in the court. That's eroding away slowly, but for now, the real fight's in the courtroom. But when it comes to bigger fish to fry, like real cases of corruption, money talks, right? And justice ain't so blind, right? Justice ain't so blind. And we've seen that. America is slowly going down a bad path, and I call it free fall, right? We're definitely falling off a cliff. So, does government make the rules? No. Does might make right? No. I don't believe so. Come on, mouse. Oh, now what is the purpose of government? What is the purpose of government? It's a philosophical question, but I'll give you my thoughts. 2 reasons for the government: national defense, an Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force. That's fine. And a Coast Guard. We'll count them in 2. And to execute criminals. That's it. That's it. That's all the government, for the most part, should be. I'll leave the rest alone because this is an intro class. But just something to think about. What is the purpose of government, right? The church, the church, right? The church. They're they got God on speed dial. They decide what's right and wrong, right? Right? No. Again, I believe this to be a false premise because, like government, the church is ultimately just a board of directors of men who have historically used their position to exploit the unfortunate for money and have not taken care of the widow and the orphan, right? And for me, being an orphan myself, I take that kind of personal. Gotta take care of the orphans and the widows, right? Widows and orphans, it's very near and dear to me because it's near and dear to me. That is not to say the church has not been a social and cultural establishment that has helped many people and directed the paths of the youth on the straight and narrow in their life, right? But church is made up of regular people prone to corruption, no different than you and I, right? I'm not saying anything bad about the church. God bless, church, the people that make up the church. A building is not church. It's not, right? But I don't believe church to make the rules philosophically, right? For the church to say what's right, what's wrong. Because church, the Pope is just another guy. Pope is just another man. He puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. All right. So if government doesn't make the rules and church don't make the rules, who makes the rules? Who's left? You. You make the rules. What is the universal moral standard which we know is what is absolutely right and wrong? Who makes the rule? You decide what's right and wrong. Yes, I decide. I make the rules. I am my own God. I am the God of my world. But I find this to be a false premise as well, because as individuals, right, just common people, we are under the subjugation of what government in wherever you're under the subjugation of the government in whatever nation you live, right? So Americans, myself included, believe it or not, I am under this, and I do mean subjugation of the government, right? I have to follow their rules. And not to say their rules are right, but I have to follow their rules. So for me to be like, I make the rules. No, you don't, because there's an authority that's over you that if they don't like what you're doing, they will throw the book at you. They've got a whole establishment in place with leg breakers, men with guns, sanctioned men with guns that will throw you in their courts and their establishments and their cage with bars around it. So like you make the no. But nonetheless, we can take the helm of our own lives and make our own decisions and be the captain of our own ship. Absolutely, right? Individual responsibility. Yes. However, our standard of our own morality is not absolute, right? It, it's like, hey, I'm feeling good. I got a promotion at work. Things are good. You're more apt to be generous. You have a bad day, things aren't going well, you're going to be a jackwagon, right? Why? Why is our standard of morality not absolute? Because we are prone to corruption. Because we're people. We're people, right? All right. So if government doesn't make the rules, religion doesn't make the rules, we don't make the rules. Then who makes the rules? What about a bunch of people, right? Not associated with the church or a government, just a mob, majority rule, right? Strength and safety in numbers, right? Great minds think alike. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Surely a large crowd of one mind can't be wrong, right? I mean, if everyone's in agreement, they couldn't possibly be wrong, right? Right? When everyone agrees on the same? I, I believe this to be a false premise. I won't elaborate too much on it, but I'll let the slide speak for itself. How a majority rule of people may not necessarily be a good thing. I don't think they make the rules. Now I will say this. If you if the bigger mob or if the bigger mob of people is calling all the shots, then your democracy is doing great. That's democracy in action. America's not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. But yes. So who makes the rules? Who makes the rules? There has to be, I should say, if there is a universal moral standard, it would stand to reason it would stand to reason to have to be something above and beyond all of us that's not created by man. There has to be something that you or I did not conceive. It's got to be beyond us, right? Because if you make the rules, well, I can say you're wrong. Well, then it's not if two people disagree, that's not absolute anymore, right? It's there has to be something above and beyond us, all of us, everybody has to be something above and beyond. What that is, that's a philosophical question, but it would stand to reason that, it's above us. It's higher than us for a standard. We would need, and we'd call that an objective morality, not a subjective morality, right? So over in this part of the world with the Muslims, they've got what they, deem is right. You got the Hindus doing what they deem is right. You got, we'll just say the Americans right here deeming what they think is right. Everyone deems what they think. That's subjective, right? That is subjective. We need something objective. And then I will cover that more in depth in the next video right here. So a wise man said, without a straight line, you don't know what a skewed line looks like, right? So you need something to measure off of to determine if you are straight on the straight and narrow, if your morality is in line with an objective morality, right? Otherwise, it's just subjective. And that's that. This is what's this, video 3? I think this is video 3 right here. Hope you all got something out of it. It's keeping it simple, very simple examples here. I'm gonna end this, upload number 4, and I think there's only 4 videos in this one. We'll take it from there. All right, I got one more after this. Hope you all are getting something out of this.